Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us
Walaikum
for
salam.
this corporate Majlis. And I hope everyone's doing well today. How are you doing, Coach Umair?
Good, Alhamdulillah. It's good to be part of this corporate Majlis again.
Great,
And
great
I
to hear.
welcome all the participants on behalf of MUMKIN. So, Saad, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about credibility, what it means and how to build it and its value in our personal and professional lives. So that's today's topic. It's a topic that actually emerged from our last workshop, and it was something suggested by one of the participants. So as always, we really welcome suggestions from participants, from attendees, and we thought it's a great idea. So let's explore it further. So I think we can start by kind of defining what is credibility exactly. What are the different components of credibility? Because it's really a multi-faceted thing, right? So as a basic definition, credibility is defined as trustworthiness. It's defined as someone who you can trust and relate to, in a quality. Sorry, it's a quality of being trusted and believed in. Fundamentally, that's what's credibility, right? But why would others refer you as someone that can be trusted in and believed in? There are many reasons for that, and it starts at the personal level. And at the personal level, it really starts with a reflection of your values and how you operate in your personal life. Right? Do you practice transparency in your personal life? When you advise or make a decision, how well informed is that decision? All of these things that are part of our personal lives are also reflected then in our professional lives as well. So it's really multifaceted. And Coach Umair, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, at the definition level, you have very beautifully put it forward as the quality of being trusted and believed in. And you rightfully said that it is one of the very important characteristics for any person in a leadership role, basically, because that's where you influence people. And you rightly said that it starts with the personal integrities, but it starts with the reflection on or a self-reflection. How credible are you in your personal life? Because that is what is reflected at your work.
So in terms of how credible are you at the personal level, right? I think there are many different ways through which you can answer that question, but it starts with self-questioning, right? In terms of your relationships, in terms of your dealings with others, and in terms of how you make your decisions. All of these things are personal. So it's about you, but they have an external impact, right? And at the organizational level, especially for people who are in positions of leadership, credibility is key, because credibility has an influence on how employees feel. Do they feel motivated? Do they not feel motivated? Credibility has an impact on long-term success of a team as well, if they are well aligned with organizational goals and their performance. So there are a lot of different components to credibility that even tie in at the professional level. I would like to ask, so we've had a couple of people join us today, and welcome. So I would like to ask our audience members as well, how do they feel in terms of credibility? What do they see, right? So those of them who are working, or even if they are not working in their personal lives, do they feel that the people around them or the team around them view them as being believable and credible?
Saad, can you repeat your question, please?
Yes. So my question to our attendees today is, how do they feel that the people around them view them do they view them as credible and believable or not? Whether it's their teams or maybe it's their personal life and their family members. Does that question sound clear now? Or should I?
The question is clear. The issue is that let's say, if people don't see me credible, I may not like that to stay in public.
But anyway, again, if we talk about that perspective, credibility itself is a very subjective matter.
That's correct.
Right. Well, it's true that you might not want to write that in public. But yeah, I think there's also a way to post it like anonymously here as well. So
I would rather recommend that you rephrase this question. For instance, what is the difference that you have observed, personally speaking, between a credible person and a person who is not credible, not so credible? What is the difference that makes a person credible? So let's talk about this, right? So people can write their comments in chat. I would like to add something. So, and that is keeping time commitment. For instance, if I say that I would reach the venue by, let's say, 8 p.m., but I always reach 8:30 or 9 p.m. or later than the time, that means I'm here losing one element of credibility, which is keeping my time commitment. Right? So this is one element, and people would can come up with different things or different viewpoints of their own. I would like to share an example, a small example that happened to me probably maybe 15-20 years back. So what happened is that I borrowed some money from one of my colleagues, and I promised him that I would return him in a few days as soon as the salary arrived. So usually our salary used to arrive in the time I was working for Etisalat Abu Dhabi, long back. So our salaries used to arrive at 25th of every month. And as I remember, I told him that I would return him the money the next day, 26th. But anyway, just to be on the same page, I also gave him a piece of paper where in my own handwriting, I wrote a note that I have borrowed this much amount of money, and I will return this on 26th. Now, what happened is that when I got the salary, and the next day I happily arrived at his doorstep to return the money, and feeling very comfortable and very happy and confident that I'm returning his money in time. And you know what he said? I told him that I returned your money in time. He said, "No, you're late." I said, "What?" He said, "You're late." Then he went inside and he brought out a small piece of paper that I wrote. And on that piece of paper, it was clearly written 25th of the month, not 26th. Right. So I was late by 1 day. But he said, "No problem. This is all right. I can forgive you." No, that was a big blow on my face. I did something, or I wrote something on a piece of paper, and which I did not remember by myself. Right. So coming back to the point, returning money in time is it adds big points to your credibility, and this is a matter which is largely ignored. So I'll just hold in here. Let other people also write some.
What I see Coach Umair's hand is up, so please go ahead.
Well, everybody was giving this example, I thought came to my mind, just a food for thought for everyone. I recalled from the stories of Sirah. I remember the night that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was going for hijrah from Makkah to Medina, and all the people of Quraysh, all the Qabail, they gathered outside his home to get rid of him. And guess what? At that very point, he had a lot of possessions of all the people of Makkah as being entrusted to him. So he left for us the example of himself as being the most credible as a person and as an entrepreneur as well. So from that example, the staunchest enemies, they were after his life, and still those same people had entrusted their possessions to him. So what a great lesson we have in that when it comes to being credible personally and at work.
Hmm. What I hear in both of your examples is one of the key behaviors associated with credibility is that what you say you do, you follow through with your commitments, right? That's like that's like a very basic foundation as well in terms of credibility. And what happens when you don't say what you do is you establish a reputation of a person who's not reliable, who is not credible, and therefore people will not trust you with their possessions. They will not trust you even with their ideas. Right now, we live in the information age, right? So I think if we think about it in today's age, it's not about material possessions, it's about information sharing, and information is wealth in today's age. So if you are not credible person, then people will not share their ideas with you, and they might not look to you for ideas either. So I see Coach Nair's hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, or rather ask people, is that why is it important that we are talking about credibility? Why that matters? Right? So let's talk a little bit about why. Let's say if I'm not credible enough or I'm credible, what difference does it make to me?
Hmm. That's a really key question.
Hmm. So why should I know? Why should I work hard to build credibility? Why?
We are very keen to hear from the attendees as well. So you can type your answers, or you can even open your mic and raise your hand, and we will have a chance to speak as well. So please share your thoughts. Why do you think it's important to work on credibility? We have a quiet crowd today. I think it's important to work on credibility because if people, what I was just saying, is we work in an information age, right, where we are constantly collaborating with others and exchanging ideas and information with others. So if we are not credible, then we won't be able to collaborate with other people and work with other people, right? So because credibility, just coming back to that definition, is closely associated with people trusting you and believing in you. If people don't trust you and believe in you, then collaborating with people towards common shared goals will become very difficult. And that's why this is my own, because you asked the question, this is my own.
Yeah.
That's why we should work on credibility. What do you think, Coach Umar? Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah. So what I think is that you rightly mentioned that credibility is essential for better collaboration towards, and better collaboration would obviously lead to better performance. So a lack of credibility anywhere in any organization would result in lower organizational performance, because it will eventually lower the trust among the people working together as a team or as members of organization. So that will directly impact the organizational performance, and definitely, yeah. So that's why credibility should be given higher importance in organizations, especially at work.
Let's talk a bit more let's explore that a bit more about work. So what do you think, what is a lack of credibility within leadership of an organization? What impact does that have on an organization? It's also a question for our attendees, like if you have seen impacts in your organization because of lack of credible leadership, please share that. What were those impacts? Perhaps, Coach Umair, you would like to share any experiences from your time in Riyadh?
Can I
Yeah.
share something? Yeah, Umair, go ahead, please.
No, neighbor, you go ahead first.
Okay. See, one of the coach what I have noticed is one of the reasons, or what happens when the leadership does not have the credibility, then people start getting disengaged. For instance, if the leaders, let's say the leaders are saying that we need to cut costs and we need to hold our expenses and so on and so forth. At the same time, you see the leaders benefiting from big perks at the same time. Then people don't trust their leaders anymore. So this is one of the things that we have seen in some cases. And this is one of the cases. Huh? Another case is that leaders they try to implement some of the values in their company or in their organizations or departments or even teams, but they themselves are not walking the talk. So this is again results in disengagement and people losing motivation, and sometimes people even leave these organizations. So coming back to the point, you say if leaders are not credible, people don't stay with them. Simple.
I would like to share a story from my experience in Jubail. Actually, I was working for Sabiq, and it was 2008. You know, the time when there was a global economic crisis. So the management decided to run a program which was aimed at cutting costs, and they named it Tarsheed. So what happened in Tarsheed was that everybody was given a task to save from different areas of spending, mainly from the consumables, from entertainment, from controllable areas. So everybody was geared up. Everybody was very much aligned with the overall idea of saving costs in order to have better financial results, so that the salaries were paid on time. The first month went by very smooth. There was some saving, some cost saving, and everybody was appreciated. Everybody was a part of it. Second month onward, we started noticing that the top management, we had 5 GMs and the president, their departments were not willfully participating in the Tarsheed program, and their spending was not going down. Instead, their spending started going up in the name of entertainment. And when that fact came known to the other department heads and other departments of the organization, there was a very bad image of the management that was created in the eyes of the other employees who were working in other departments. So at the end of the day, the result was, after 6 months when they reviewed, the overall organization cost went up instead of going down, despite the Tarsheed program being in force for 6 months. So that mainly happened because the staff, all the staff that had to implement the Tarsheed program lost credibility, lost trust in the management, and hence everybody who would save a lot of unnecessary expenditure started caring less about the unnecessary expenditure. Instead, they started spending more on the things which they would need, and hence the end result was that the organizational cost went up.
That's a really good point. So basically, a lack of credibility has a direct influence on the bottom line of an organization, on the profitability of an organization. And sooner or later, it starts to hit profitability. That's a very interesting story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I've also seen something similar where in 2017 or 2018, there was a lot of layoffs happening in some of the companies here. And one of the things that I saw in the teams was this senior director rolled up in a new Maserati, and all the staff were thinking there are these layoffs happening, and you know, this guy is coming in his flashy car. So they lost faith in him, and that, you know, on what basis are these layoffs happening if our management can still afford luxuries. So I think you're right that lack of credibility creates employee distrust in an organization. It also impacts reputation of the organization as well, because if employees don't find the organization credible, then they probably won't be very positive about that organization outside to the external market as well. We have all oftentimes not oftentimes, once in a while when I'm coaching someone, they feel very dissatisfied with the organization they are working in, and they express dissatisfaction, right? So the organization's brand is also going down along with its along with its credibility. Right. So let's move on. I would like to request our attendees to share anything or any thoughts they have at this stage about credibility, about what we're talking about. And in the meanwhile, we can move on to the next point, which is since we have defined what is credibility, why it's important, and what happens when there's a lack of credibility in organizations, such as profitability and organizational reputation going down, and all of those things. Let's also explore how does one build their own credibility, whether you're in a leadership position or even at a personal level. Where do you start with building credibility? So, Coach Umair, do you have any thoughts on that?
No. I think there are three main components of credibilities, and we can very clearly talk about them. Anybody can, if somebody would address those three components of credibility, I think that's the way to go about improving credibility at a personal level or at an organization or at work. So one is the basic is someone's personality, the basic personality traits, as Nayibhai mentioned, an example about returning a loan or making a commitment and then willfully or unwillfully not being able to fulfill the commitment. Speaking truth, choosing to speak the truth or not, being unclear in communication. Those are the personal components of credibility. Then the second component is the competencies required for a certain job or for a certain work to be done. And then the expertise and skills for that. So these three components are where we can talk. So if we further drill down into these three components, I would say I would read out some things and we can discuss them in further detail. For example, in order to build your credibility, one needs to stick to the commitments. So make your commitments very carefully, and once you have committed something, then just stick to them. That's one way to improve your credibility. Be modest. In organizations, in our daily life, with the people we meet, we find people who brag about themselves, who would just do a little and make it appear as it was something very, very big. So they basically destroy their credibility by doing so, if proven otherwise. Personal integrity is a very important aspect of developing or improving the credibility at a personal level at work. So that the list can go on. There are so many things. So how would you like to continue with the list, or would you like to?
So I think the question was I'm kind of curious about, how can one start? Where should one start, right? If they were to start working on developing their credibility better. So we have a question actually from the audience. We said, how do you build credibility with people who have a stereotype? How do you build? So that's an interesting question. What a stereotype view of you. Could you clarify? I guess the way I perceive stereotype view is they have some preconceived notion of who you are, or based on where you come from. So how do you build credibility with such people? Coach Umair, you have any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I missed your question. There was some interruption in the.
Okay, the question that we have received is, how do you build credibility with people who have a stereotype view of you? That's the question.
Okay, so I would like to answer, if you permit me, Saad.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Now, see, if the person has a stereotype view of you, that means the person does not know you in detail or closely. So what do you do in that case? The first thing that let's say if I am the person and others are stereotyping me, they have a different point of view. So what can I do in this situation? That means they do not have a close relationship with me. So in my interactions with them, I need to be taking care of a couple of things. For instance, rather than pushing my own viewpoint or judgments or statements, I would rather be careful in asking questions. So what happens? This is the beauty of asking questions. When you ask questions, the other people, they open up, they self-reflect, and then they only respond to you. So this helps them, since you are asking about them, this helps them come close to you automatically. And when they start coming close to you, this starts lowering the fence between you and them, right? And the same way, the stereotyping also starts reducing, and finally, or gradually rather, it vanishes away, right? So this is one of the ways that you can cover or mend the gap between you or someone else. So let me repeat, or let me conclude here, that one way is to not to be judgmental and ask questions if you want to get close. Second thing I would rather say that one of the things which adds a lot to the credibility is to avoid taking things personally. For instance, there's a guy who says that Nair, you have a beard like this, or you have an appearance like this, and whatnot. So rather than taking it personally, I ask a question, right? Okay. So for instance, if someone comments on your dressing or something like that, you can ask a question. Okay. So what is the preferred way of dressing for you, for instance, or preferred way of your appearance, or whatever? Or what is your point of view in this context, and so on and so forth. So when you ask a question, again, really lowering your senses, invisible senses, and asking question, I believe this will help you a great deal in removing the stereotypes of others.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's very insightful.
Yeah. So Sadhu, you asked me the question. The first thing that comes to my mind is any person who have a stereotype view of you or someone. What comes to my mind for the first as a first thought is that person who is stereotyping someone else is not credible himself, because what he is doing is he is not building the relationship, he's breaking the relationship somehow. So Nirbai has rightly said that in such cases you start building the relationship. That's what you can do. Whatever he's stereotyping is probably not something that you need to be bothered about. You do your work, you build your credibility, and eventually that person would see that you are credible.
Right. So it's about focusing on the self, right? Because your locus of control starts with you. You can't control other people, but we can change ourselves. And I think we've all seen many examples of how when you work on yourself, the people around you also starts to change, right? There's some interesting magic and science behind it, that when you change, the people around you start to change. And previously also on this forum, we've heard some very interesting stories where a person worked on themselves and their team start to get influenced by them, and they start to adopt more credible behaviors as well. The other interesting thing came to my mind just now is what about thinking before saying? Like, how to be less reactive? Because trust, it's a famous thing, right? Trust takes a long time to build, but in one moment it can be gone. So that's an interesting area to explore. I see Coach Nayar's hand is up.
I would like to add one thing over here. Yes, my point is that how do we know that the other person is stereotyping me, right? So is it a judgment, or is it an opinion, or is it a fact? So if it is an opinion, it could be wrong, possibly, right? And that opinion could change over a period of time if I develop a closer communication with that person. If this was an opinion, right? And if this was a fact, let's say that other person is stereotyping, then why is that a really, really important for me that I build my credibility and I build closer relationship with a person who is factually stereotyping me? Is this the battle that I want to fight? I repeat my words. Is this the battle that I want to fight? If yes, then go ahead and fight. Excuse me. If not, then probably the best way is to ignore and start developing your credibility with other people who are not stereotyping. If it is just a matter of one person. So this is my sincere opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
And so the golden principle that you refer to probably is whatever you focus on, you get more of it. So you focus on building your credibility and not addressing the other person's issues of not of stereotyping you as not credible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So self-development trumps trying to, try to understand what the other person is thinking, etc. Of course, as has been said on this forum, you can ask open-ended questions to understand the other person's point of view. But at the end of the day, the only person you can work on directly is yourself, right? and working on building yourself up and your credibility up. And as part of that, one of the things which I was just sharing, it was how reactive are you to situations? Because building trust takes a long time. Building trust with friends, with your family, at your work, and you can lose it very easily if you adopt a reactive behavior. Reactive meaning that you respond to problems in a way of from a personal perspective with self-interest rather than trying to serve the problem or service the issue at hand to the wider goal, right? So how can we avoid being reactive and think before we say? Coach Umair, any thoughts about that?
I lost you in between. Can you please?
Sorry about that. So I'll repeat what I'm trying to say. And my question is that one of the ways that we build credibility is people trust us. They trust what we say. And we all know that building the trust, right, it takes a lot of effort, but it can be lost very easily if we are reactive. So the question is, how can we adopt a behavior where we are more mindful about what we say and where we think more before speaking, so that people don't think of us as reactive and we don't give reactive solutions, we give constructive, informed advice to others?
Yes. So there are multiple ways to do that. Being mindful is a complete different science, and what I would say in a summary form is that we should do things. We should adopt our behaviors that will help us not being reactive. Instead of being reactive, we should adopt a responsiveness policy. What does that mean? A reaction which is an impulsive action or impulsive thought that comes out in reaction of something that happens to us. And what you just said is, when something happens, we need to adopt a habit in ourselves, or we need to understand how to absorb what happened and how to think it through, and then respond with something which does not hit our credibility or trust. So that can be done by doing a lot of mindfulness exercises, being a better listener, being more responsible of our words. The list goes on. If you,
I would like to add something to that as well. I think also there are not just in leadership positions, but this applies across all positions, right? Because in one way or the other, we are leading something in our lives. So what about the mindset of a servant leader? What that means is, I am not here to serve myself. I am here to serve situations and people. So that's a mindset which you can adopt. That becomes your default positions. So if something comes to you, if a problem or a challenge is presented towards you, you don't approach it from, and sometimes it needs a quick response, but you don't approach it from a place of self-serving. You approach it from a place of, how can I serve this situation to the best of my ability? Right? So I think, and that's called servant leadership or servant mindset. Right? Okay. So
excellent.
And by the way, this is, again, I keep prompting our participants, please keep your thoughts coming. Any thoughts you have, any questions you have, we are very keen to hear from you. We often get our ideas for even the next session from the ideas you shared during our forum. So this is a team discussion. and everyone is welcome to open their mics and share their views about what we're talking about. The other thing, Coach Umair, which occurred to me is credibility also has a lot to do with long-term success, right? Right. So people perceive you as credible after you have achieved long-term success in something. So this is my thought. Would you agree with that? Would you say that long-term success is a component that makes you more credible in an area?
I think you're right in saying long-term success, but if we may add the efforts or the journey that one takes in order to achieve long-term success, that would probably be more appropriate to present what you're saying.
Right. So how can we? Yeah. So I see there is a hand up. Please go ahead.
I would like to add something over here. See, this credibility, as you also mentioned a few minutes before, it takes a long time to develop and very short time to crash, right? So coming back to your point, you said credibility in personal or organizational level has something to do with the long-term objective. Yes, of course, it has to. Yeah. Sorry, come again.
Yeah. That's what. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. So yes. So it has to have an alignment with the long-term objective. For instance, let's suppose my department has a different objective, which is aligned with the corporate objective. Let's suppose, right? But my personal vision is different, and I want to drive my team towards a different objective and different vision. That's it. So then that if these two are not aligned, then definitely there's going to be a clash, right? And if there's a clash, then I lose my credibility as a team lead or team leader, right? So this is fairly simple. Now on the other side, for me, if I align myself with long-term objectives, so the credibility increases, and it also takes time to develop that credibility, right? Maybe a year, maybe 2 years, or maybe even more, right? So did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. The part about
I would like to, I would like to add something over here. So sometimes I happen to coach a group of business developers. So these business developers, they had a very interesting issue. They say that there is a difference between us and the teams who develop software, and the difference is because we don't understand and speak each other's language. So there is a gap, and because of this gap, we are not able to work as effectively as we should have been working as effectively, right? So coming back to the point, now these two are not aligned because the business developers were aligned with the corporate objectives, and although apparently software developers were aligned also with the corporate objectives, but their objectives was different. They were not business centric, or they were not customer centric. They were technology centric, right? So you understand this point. Now, because of this, the credibility factor starts going down between these two teams. And then they were not happy with each other, and the work did not flow smoothly between these two teams. So did I make my point clear over here? Software development team was not in alignment with the business development team, and because of this, credibility starts going down, and because of that, ultimately the work started suffering. So I did not coach them. I think I just have had 2 to 3 sessions with the business development team, but not with the software development team. So this is one of the things that I noticed. When the alignment is not there, you start losing credibility, and the work gets affected. Thank you.
I think this begs the question. We have established that when there's not a lack of alignment between teams and organization, then it results in a bunch of issues and it causes credibility problems because the long-term success cannot be achieved. So I think it begs the question that from whether you're a team member or you're a team leader, how can you better align with your organizational objectives? Where do you start that exercise? What's the question there? So, Coach Umair, any thoughts on that?
By developing a better communication, being genuine. So I think that's the starting point. When you communicate better, when you put aside the personal differences and you focus on or you focus on building credibility among the teams. That's where you start, and then move forward with having better exchange of information. For example, I'm coaching a guy. He is a senior manager for development,
Mhm.
and we were having our discussion today morning, and he mentioned that he's been always trying to complete everything on time, but the data owner is someone else. The other department is the data owner, and he mentioned some things that raised the alarm that those guys. He used terms like those guys, or those. He was talking about the manager of the team. So that guy is not always late in providing data. That guy is not fixing his system to produce the correct data. So I asked him, how credible are you in his eyes? And that immediately shifted his focus from this guy to himself. And then he started exploring himself. And then he came up with some ideas where he thought that if he does these things, he might be better able to achieve what he wanted to achieve. And as a matter of fact, and this will surprise you, I used to coach the other guy as well a few months ago. So he had the similar things, that my data is always ready, but the development team is not capable enough or something to make use of that data and complete the implementation on time. So there I see a lack of credibility, and with both of those teams and through their managers work on credibility, results are obvious. Results start coming in.
Mm.
So to answer your question, the starting point is developing better communication.
Mm. Developing better communication. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was a very insightful story, and interesting that you coach people on both sides of the fences in that story there. Hmm. I see that there's a hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add a point over here, and which it struck my head based on what Coach Umar just said, which is communicate. So the point that I would like to add over here, especially in case of leadership, that there is something called over communication. What is over communication? That you don't communicate the vision and the strategy of your company only once in a year in your corporate or annual meetups. No. You do that over and over again in every other meeting, and whenever you are meeting your next inline manager or the senior leadership of the company, or whoever, or even if the community juniors. I'm talking about the senior leadership of the company. So this over communicating is critically important. This over communicating terminology is coined by Patrick Lencioni. He is one of the famous, very renowned, successful author of business books. So one of the books that he has authored is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. This is one of the best books that he has written. It's like a fable or a business story, but there are many other books also. So Patrick Lencioni has communicated this over and over again, so that the leadership should be communicating it or over communicating to their people about their company visions and so on and so forth. So what happens because when you communicate only once or twice in a year, people tend to forget. When people forget, the alignment you start losing the alignment, or alignment starts getting out. And then people, they are not so much attached or remain closely tied to the company's mission and vision, so on and so forth. So this is one of the things that is important. I just recall and I thought I would convey. Thank you.
What I find interesting in that is that if for someone who doesn't know, over communicating might sound like a bad thing because it carries a negative connotation, right? But as you're saying, Patrick Lencioni, the author, he has coined this term, and it's actually a good thing. Over communicating the vision and with key leadership, with deputy managers, etc. The one other point that I would like us to explore a little bit is consistency of decision making as well, right? Sorry, Coach Amir, you have a hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, from the everybody's example, something just came to my mind because it's very hot these days in Pakistan. Politicians, they tend to over communicate. They repeat everything again and again and again so that their workers and their supporters would always have things on their fingertips on what the leader wants and what the manifesto is. So that's a very good insight, Nair.
Hmm. So we should learn a
Thank you.
thing or two
Can I, it
from
sounds,
the politicians.
yeah,
So,
sir, I'm sorry to interrupt in between, sir, but I would like to state a very interesting example, a very recent example.
please
In
go
the
ahead.
recent match, in the recent match of Saudi Arabia, which Saudi Arabia won against Argentina a few days before, I think it was Wednesday, right? Maybe just 3 days ago. So, or Tuesday. So what happened is that in the first half, Argentina scored 1 goal. Messi scored 1 goal, and Saudis did not score any single goal. And then the team was in the break, during the break time. The team was inside in the room, and their coach came, and they were all sad and concerned about what's going to happen about the match and so on and so forth. You know what the coach did? He's a French coach, and there's a documentary also that came up on internet. So that French coach, he speaks in a heavy accent of English. He says, guys, 30 million people are eyeing on you. They are sticking to their screens. Roads in Saudi Arabia are deserted. People are watching you, and you guys are sad with your heads down. Do you think it is okay like this? You know, he injected energy in the team like this, by his words. And then the team stood up, and then they scored 2 more goals, and thus became history. Right. So this is I would say a part of over communication. So although this coach has been working for this team for probably years, but this is where he comes again in the picture, and he inspires people by his communication. Right. So over communication does not mean that you keep repeating same words so that people get just tired and sick of your communication. No, over communication is inspiring. Right. So I hope I made my point clear. Thank you.
That's really clear, and thank you so much for clarifying that. That's a very interesting story as well. That over communication, but with the intention to inspire, not to just repeat the same message over and over again. So that's really interesting. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any thoughts on that as well? I keep prompting our attendees because we have a quiet bunch this afternoon with us. And always great to have you guys on, and please share your thoughts about any of the stories, any of the points that you're raising. So Coach Umar, the other thing which came to me was also about decision making, right? So especially for leadership positions, I think credibility is often judged by how consistently you make your decisions, on what criteria you make your decisions. Because on a day-to-day basis, if you go in like 4 different directions, people say, man, this guy is not, it's not easy to work with him, because depending on any given day, it can go in the conversation with him can go in any different direction. That's one point which came to me as well.
Yeah, that's true. The people who can make better decisions are more credible. That's a generally accepted rule. In addition to that, if you look at any organization or any group of people or anyone around you, you will always find the decision makers on one side and the advice seekers on the other side. And just look at them, which group is more credible? So in order for a leader, especially, or anyone, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, every one of us is in a leadership role somehow. So being in a leadership role, you face a lot of occasions, a lot of choices where you have to make a decision. A quick decision, a better decision, a well-informed decision is what makes you more credible in the eyes of others who seek your advice.
We have a question as well that's come in. The question is, how long should it take for someone to win someone's credibility back, or how long does it take for someone to see you as credible? Any thoughts on this?
That's a very interesting question. So my thoughts about this question are, Saad, that you remember I mentioned earlier during our conversation that it's about the focus. Where your focus goes, energy flows in that direction. So if your focus is to win someone's credibility, or if I may, if I have understood the question correctly, if your focus is to become more credible, then your energy will be spent or directed towards becoming more credible by doing things that make you more credible. If your focus is directed towards someone, becoming more credible in the eyes of someone, or specifically, for example, an employee would like to be more credible in the eyes of the management. So his energy or things would probably be directed towards that, or that direction only. Where so my response to this question would be that the best thing to do is to focus on building your credibility as general and not in a specific context. What that would mean is that you succeed in building your credibility in that specific context, but you also become more credible in everything else.
There's another question. What things can make someone credible? What things can we do? So I think that's a great question, and it's a good point for us to talk about what are the actions that we can start taking today to make us more credible.
There are a lot of things that we can do. You know, I mean, everything is equally important. Every action that you take towards building your credibility is equally important. But to me, the most important thing appears to be sticking to your commitments.
Basically, doing what you say, or walking the talk.
Walking the talk. There are so many other things that we can do. One can be modest, like I mentioned earlier. Some people are habitual of bragging about themselves. They claim to do things that they have never done, and then when it actually comes to that point, obviously you lose your credibility when it comes to doing those things that you have always bragged about, but in reality you can't do them. Another thing that comes to my mind is develop yourself, develop your skills. When we talk about at workplace, develop yourself professionally, because the world is ever changing. If you are an architect, maybe you need to learn new technologies. That makes you more credible. If you're a coach, you need to grow as a coach. You need to add more credentials to your name so that you become more credible in the eyes of your clients. Develop yourself professionally and personally by seeking more credentials, higher credentials of where you are. You mentioned a very important point about reacting and responding to things. That makes you more credible. Being socially responsible, we develop more credibility. Like, for example, if someone is in a role where he needs to be very, very responsible of his actions. For example, if you are a spokesperson of or you're a media face of some organization and you go clubbing, obviously you'll end up being not credible. So Nayar has something to say.
Yeah, I would like to add something over here for building credibility. We talked about commitment, but I would like to talk about something which we normally almost every one of us do, and we don't realize that this affects our credibility so much. And this is talking out loud. For instance, whenever I say, I'm planning to come to Islamabad. Let's suppose, right? I tell you, and I don't come, and neither I have planned to come to Islamabad, and neither I come to Islamabad for another 6 months, right? Now, although maybe you take it lightly, but not everyone does, right? So similarly, we tend to say so many things that we don't do. I will do this, or I will do this maybe 6 months down the line, and so on and so forth. So this also, which I call thinking out loud, although our intention is not bad, intention is good, but since we have no plans to do that, we better not say that, because this affects our credibility a big deal, big time, in fact. So I know a person over here, and he has an issue of talking out loud, and he doesn't mind it. Actually, his intention is not bad either. He wants to. He says that the good intention, but ultimately he doesn't do that. When he doesn't do that, it affects his credibility a big time. Right. So this is one thing. The other thing is which is which is how to step up the credibility is stop talking about people behind their back. And this I remember when I happened to coach a team some time back, and in this team we ran an exercise called feed forward. And feed forward is an exercise where we ask team members about each other. So one of my team members mentioned about the team leader is that, please, Nayyar, as a coach, please tell him to stop talking about people behind their back, because this is affecting his credibility. So as a coach, when I happened to meet the team lead, he had absolutely no idea that he has been doing this, and he never realized it. Right. So this is one of the things that affects our credibility, and we don't realize. So stop talking about people behind their back, right? And avoid gossiping. So I think we have very small amount of time left. So I would like you to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as part of the conclusion, I just want to quote something which Coach Umair shared with us. Very interesting thing. Where your focus goes, energy flows. So I think that can be our mantra for the week ahead, is that we should observe where our focus is going, and try to channel it in ways that make us more credible and serviceable to the people around us, to our teams, and to the world around us. So Coach Umair, would you like to add any thoughts to that, and then conclude as well? Thank you.
Excellent food for thought, Saad. So let's see where where our focus is, and observe where our energy is flowing, and make any required adjustments if needed. With that, I would, if you allow me, Saad, I would like to conclude the discussion, as we are almost there.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. Lovely to have you on.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Alaikum assalam.